Muted.
Is the mental health component. So what's the client's trauma history? And they might have an actual mental health diagnosis. All of the mental health history we tried to get during our initial intake and then throughout treatment, so that we can better serve each client individually. In addition, when we're working with clients, some of the barriers have to do with a client's life skills. So what's their language ability, how much formal education have they had, and how much have they acculturated into the U.S. Already. One of the bigger ones as well is clients' expectations. So one of the things we do during intake and then pretty much every session after is to make sure that we're on the same page with our clients so that we can have the same expectations for our time together. And then lastly, insufficient support system. This one is important because we've found that the client's ability to have a support system, whether it's family here or overseas, really impacts their treatment.
And before Laura continues, I'm going to ask again for people to respond by typing into the chat box and just giving us a letter of what they struggle with the most.
Mm-hmm. Some of the things that have come up already on the prompter are affordable housing and interpretation services at medical providers. Those are really good ones, and this is one way to show an example that being in a case management role is often you might have to wear an advocacy hat. So you can look at the laws around medical interpretation and advocate for your client that way, as well as there is usually some pro bono or volunteer interpreters that might be available for those types of appointments.
And also, so why we're asking this in the context of a strengths approach webinar is because the strengths perspective won't magically remove any of these barriers, but it can help you in your dealing with them. And I think we probably all had moments when clients told us of a problem and we felt helpless. So the strengths-based perspective will hopefully help you to find a starting place to help the clients with these types of problems. And for insufficient resources, because I think that one feels probably the hardest, and we've gotten a few that are saying that. So my recommendation is just try not to be dismissive and try not to let yourself get burnt out and to stop advocating. And recently I kind of relearned this lesson because I had a client who needed a neurosurgeon and didn't have insurance, is seeking asylum, and that was just no way, there was no clear answer to how to connect them to a neurosurgeon. So after I tried all of the free clinics that I could think of, I just continued to get creative and asked around even more, and that's when I did find someone who offered to see them for free.
Mm-hmm. Oftentimes you can also build on their past experience. So especially for letter D, clients' life skills, what did they do in their home country? Everything from what they did for fun and enjoyment, and then how did they learn best, what was their past job and employment experience. So all of those things you can, even if they're not able to identify them, you can bring them up and use them as you're trying to identify some resources and some ways forward.
And also with my work, when I worked with people with intellectual and development disabilities, finding any springboard for an interest or a life skill, like sometimes the only thing we could really focus on that they liked was TV, but that is one thing that they like, and from there you can grow other interests and other abilities. So we also wanted to explain a little bit about the work that we both do. So I work exclusively for the Program for Survivors of Torture and Severe Trauma, or PSTT, and it's an interdisciplinary program that takes a holistic approach. And through this program, clients can access legal, immigration assistance, therapy, clinical case management, psychiatry, and limited direct assistance. Therapy is provided in the client's language, and the services through PSTT are free to everyone who qualifies. So in order to qualify for PSTT, they have to meet the criteria of the Torture Victims Relief Act, and that means that all of my clients have to have experienced an act committed by a person acting under the color of law, that they have to have experienced harm inflicted that was intentional, and the intention was to inflict severe physical pain, severe physical suffering, and or severe mental pain and suffering. And because those are the requirements of my program, most of my clients are very vulnerable. They're usually asylum seekers, asylees, or refugees.
And then for clients that don't fit into the PSTT program, we also have a program for survivors of trafficking that offers clinical case management as part of that, and that's in partnership with USCRI and ORR. We serve a lot of clients who are survivors of domestic violence. We serve refugees and immigrants living in Fairfax County in Northern Virginia, and also any resident of Fairfax County that would fit into our socioeconomic criteria for treatment.
So I'm going to read this out loud. Normally I'm against reading directly from a slide, so bear with me. So case management is a process to plan, seek, advocate for, and monitor services from direct social services or healthcare organizations and staff on behalf of a client. The process enables social workers in an organization or in different organizations to coordinate their efforts to serve a given client through professional teamwork, thus expanding the range of needed services offered. Case management limits problems arising from fragmentation of services, staff turnover, and inadequate coordination among providers. Case management can occur within a single large organization or within a community program that coordinates services among settings. So why I found this important to include is because this is the very straightforward official definition of what we do, but there's a lot of variation within case management. It might vary from organization to organization, and maybe at your organization they tend to hire different people with different backgrounds. So it's important that we're all able to easily explain our roles to clients, since many are unfamiliar with case management as a concept. So again, I wanted to ask questions of everyone, so please type in again into the chat. So is this definition the version of case management practice at your organization? And for me and Laura, we're both of our titles are clinical case managers, which means that we incorporate therapeutic techniques into our work. But I'm guessing that everyone has just a slightly different approach to case management. All right, I'm going to move on, but I'll come back. Oh.
Allie?
Yeah.
There's one question that says, could you show the definition again?
Oh, sure.
And then one comment, is it the same?
Okay. What? Is it the same?
Mm-hmm. It just says, is it the same? Not sure.
Can you, whoever wrote that, can you clarify what you mean?
She says it's the same for our organization. That's what she meant.
Oh, okay. All right, I'm going to move on, but if anyone has any comments or any reflection on the case management they provide, feel free to share that and we'll come back to it. So also it is important that we also understand how to explain our role to clients. Obviously not all cultures have this concept. So a lot of times how I'll break it down for clients is I'll say something like, my job is to help connect you to services and resources that you need to help you reach your goals. And I also will explain that I'm here to help them learn as they use those resources, and I will help explain that ultimately our goal is self-sufficiency. Mm-hmm. And it looks like we have another response. Looks like everyone's agreeing that this is the definition that people are using. So also in explaining what a case manager does, I think it's important that you give them examples sometimes too, like if they are asking for help finding employment. A lot of cultures would find jobs directly through someone. It's part of their networking I would literally be able to find them a job in those cultures. So it's my job to explain that that's not something I can do, but I can help them practice for interviews. I can help connect them to employment centers, answer questions about what to expect when applying, teach them how to look for jobs online, help them fill out applications or look up places where they might walk in and ask for an application.
So when we're talking about a strengths-based practice, we're talking about something that was developed as an alternative to deficit-focused care. This was first developed in the social work field in 1989 by a team from the University of Kansas. And basically, it's a philosophy that doesn't have one formula because it is more like a philosophy. It's pretty simple. The idea behind it is that it's better to focus on a client's strengths rather than their weaknesses. So it emphasizes self-determination and existing skills and resources. In the strengths-based approach, you build on the resilience and potential for growth and development inherent in each individual. It's really client-centered and goal-oriented, and it is based on a collaboration and a relationship of participation between the case manager and the client. And we do want to note that sometimes it can seem that focusing on strengths may minimize a client's past experiences and trauma, and this approach in no way should minimize what a client has been through to get to where they are today. Instead, it's helping them see the strengths even through what they've come through. And we're going to talk a little bit more because one of the things that comes up when you're using this approach is what do you do with a client who is sitting in front of you for the first time or even the 10th time and they cannot themselves identify their own strengths. So we'll be talking about that a little bit throughout this webinar, and please ask questions if it's not clear, if you need ideas about a specific situation.
All right, so we're going to go into more detail in the daily skills and interventions that we use that clearly incorporate the strengths-based approach, and these are things that all case managers are using or doing, identifying strengths, creating attainable goals, coping skills, working on coping skills, teaching, and also we're going to talk a little bit about your clinical self-awareness. So I know that many of these incorporate therapeutic skills, but they are skills that, like especially with the coping skills that we're going to go over, these are skills that everyone can do. You don't need a degree. And I also know that people on this call are very busy people. You don't have a lot of time. You don't want to incorporate a whole new thing into your routine. But the things that we're going to go over are things that are there also to help save you time. So if a client's symptoms are creating barriers to care, then a lot of these goals can help you like reconnect with them so that they can focus.
So how do we work with clients to identify strengths? The simple answer to this is that during an intake, I always ask clients what they would think of their own strengths to be, and the answers really range. Most of the time, clients are at least able to identify strengths in things like children or faith. Sometimes they're not able to identify any strengths at all. So you can work with the client to slowly start to change their focus on their own deficits to potential. I had a client even earlier today who just got a new job, but because of the stresses of trying to figure out how they would get to the new job and how they would take care of their children, it took away from the joy of kind of celebrating in that new strength that they had gotten over the past week. You can externalize the problem, so try to take a step back and ask them questions like, what would others say your strengths are? How have you gotten through difficult things in the past? What strengths have you observed in yourself or others? And this is something that will probably take a lot of time, especially for clients that have been through a lot of trauma, and so it's just kind of having patience enough to slowly help build this into clients.
And also, I think this is a good time to go back to one of the questions that we overlooked, but it was in regards to the example of when I was working with people with developmental and intellectual disabilities, that sometimes the strength was watching TV. It was a single interest, and the question was, how would you use that as a springboard practically? So with that client, through him watching TV, we could talk about, what do you enjoy watching people do? What kind of shows do you like? And through that, we learned that he was really interested in running, so we helped him join a running team. That's definitely the simplified version, but it helped us get a dialogue going. That may not be how you can use it as a strength for other cases, though it really is case by case.
During the first 1 to 2 times of meeting with a client, it's important to establish some pretty clear goals about what you're going to be working on in the relationship together. If you have trouble thinking about how to make goals that are that mean something, there's quite a few different things you can Google. There's SMART goals, so if you make goals that are specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound, that's something that kind of helps. I'm always thinking about, when the client's speaking, is this something that is realistic? And if it is, then how can we make a plan to actually make this attainable for the client? One of the things also that I try to do in creating goals is just to be really honest with clients. Sometimes clients come in with very high goals, and they may not actually be realistic based on where they are right now. I would never want to take away from reaching the most potential that they can, but things like the housing, what housing is available. I definitely want to let them know about what kind of housing crisis we're in Northern Virginia, so that they don't come away from a case management session thinking that I'm going to get them a wonderful free 3-bedroom house or anything like that. So that's really about educating the client about what resources are available in your area, and then working together to create actual steps that you can take together. One of the most important things to do in this is to just meet each client where they are. I have some clients where I can just kind of help them start the process during a session together, and then by the next time we meet, they've already followed through and accomplished everything we talked about. Other clients really rely on the sessions together to do every step. So in that way, it's really working with the client and where they are. And in addition, Allison and I will sometimes use things like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If a client comes in who has so many needs and goals, to prioritize where we start. Sometimes it's important to just make a list of priorities so that you can at least focus on getting the most important done and then work your way down to some of the other needs that can wait a bit longer.
All right, so most of the time clients have existing coping skills. They usually just aren't calling them that. For example, I have one client who takes a walk at least 3 times a week with her children, and she says that that helps her feel better, and her kids have both said that helps them feel better too. So they're not calling it a coping skill, they're just calling it a family walk. And everyone on this call, especially the people working with refugees, understands how past trauma can affect their care. And I'm really hoping that everyone leaves this webinar with a couple no tools that incorporate things that all of your clients have access to. It's just kind of prompting them to use them. So, for example, almost every client that you will ever see has a memory and they have senses. So I'm going to go into more detail about this a little bit later, but it's very easy to incorporate some of these skills into what you're already doing. So the first thing seems pretty obvious, but it's called an Oasis. It's an activity that requires concentration and attention and helps reduce hyperarousal and the client's inner dialogue. So it creates a mental oasis for people with PTSD, and the specific activities that work for different people can vary. It can be a hobby, but it can't be one that they are so familiar with that it comes as second nature. It has to be something that they have to think a little bit about. So it could be needlework, chess, painting, and what I've found recently is those really detailed adult coloring books actually work really well for some clients. So in cases where a client is feeling really overwhelmed and you can kind of see that their eyes glaze over and you know they're not really there in the room with you anymore, that's when I might pull out an adult coloring book sheet and just change the topic, and we'll talk a little bit more about some other skills that you can use. But then we can do that for a couple minutes and then we can go back to what we were doing, and their focus is renewed through that. And you can also help them think of ways that they can do this at home, and a lot of clients might do things like knitting or gardening, and it's not exclusive to mostly like what we view as female activities. It also can be car repair or playing solitaire. It just varies from person to person. So the next coping skill is called an anchor. And this is what I was alluding to a little earlier with memory and senses as a resource. And this is a tool that you won't go out of your way to use, but you can, again, incorporate it in what you're already doing with the client. It's another one that you can use when you can see that they're very overwhelmed. So you can watch for signs of that. Maybe they have a change in breathing, they're tensing their muscles, they're red or very pale. But especially if you've been working for the client for a while, you probably know how they look once they're feeling completely overwhelmed, and you can also help them identify that. So the first thing you can do is to ask them about a comforting person, a place, an activity, a pet, an object, a vacation place, just something that brings up a positive memory. And if you know a little background on the person, you can start to ask more detailed things like, I have one client who really cherishes her memories with her grandmother, and I'll say something like, yeah, I know your grandmother was a good cook. Can you tell me about a time when you were cooking with your grandmother? And then it's something she enjoys talking about. I know it can be kind of awkward sometimes to just stop everything and bring it to there, but you can transition it to, I notice you're feeling a little overwhelmed. You can bring it back to what you're noticing so the client also has that self-awareness that they can use of, I notice you seem to be clenching your fist, or your jaw seems tight right now. Anything like that, or your breathing is fast. Can you tell me how you're feeling, or would you like to talk about something else? And that's when you can help to change the topic to an anchor. So the other one I use is when clients feel so overwhelmed by their memories that any good memory might be easily connected to a traumatic one, then I'll use their body, their senses as a resource. So this helps connect them back into awareness of their body and what they're feeling. And some clients who have been through trauma have a really hard time with that. So rather than asking them to think of a comforting time or a place, you ask them really specific questions about the sensations that they're feeling, like what are you hearing right now? What do you see? What colors do you see? What are your hands feeling right now? Are the arms of the chair soft or hard or smooth? Sometimes if they are very, very overwhelmed, it's helpful to hand them something that has a pleasant smell, like soap or a scented candle, and ask them questions about that too to help kind of root them back in the moment. And whereas going back to a memory, that helps them de-escalate into calm and to use their body as a resource. That one helps more to anchor them in the present rather than having them overwhelmed by the past or the future.
One of the other approaches you can use in a strength-based model is to be in a teaching role. So as you're working with clients, you want to learn how to enhance the client's sense of self and ability to advocate for themselves in multiple settings. There may be some settings where a client feels comfortable engaging in and advocating for themselves, and then other settings or situations where they don't feel comfortable at all and could use some guidance in that way. We try to look at it as not doing for a client what they can do for themselves, and teaching is a good way of kind of encouraging and pushing them to try something to see how much they can engage before you do something for a client. I like to think of every interaction with a client as a teaching opportunity, and not just me teaching them, but really having the client teach me about their experience and their expertise in different areas and how we can use that experience and relate it to what they're experiencing now. Identifying what the client will need to be able to do tasks independently. Again, this will really range between different clients, and there might be some areas where they're able to be successful in an independent way and other areas where they really need some assistance. At NVFS, our case management program is set up to promote self-sufficiency. That's the ultimate goal. So this is something that we're constantly assessing, is how much the client can do for themselves and when we are no longer needed. And again, like I said earlier, it's really about meeting the client where they are and then working with them from there. Another thing that we teach about often in our role is using psychoeducation to teach about different stressors and reactions to stress. Because all of us on this call have so many clients who have pretty severe trauma backgrounds, it can be extremely helpful to teach about some of the common stressors, the common reactions to stress, common mental health issues that they might be experiencing, and then coping skills related to de-escalation and calming. In addition, if they have children that have been through trauma, it's important to teach parents about how they can interact with their own child better and what they should look for to make sure that their child is also living in a healthy way and getting the resources that they need.
So another thing that's really important for us as case managers is that we're aware of any transference and countertransference or how the client may direct their emotions to you and how your past relationships and experience might impact how you perceive the client. Because that does affect that relationship, and it can help to be aware of that. So it's also important to mean what you say, and this is where it's especially important not to be overly positive or to deny struggles. So being honest is part of successfully building that rapport and establishing an alliance with the client. So if there is a lack of resources, if there are these genuine struggles the client is going through, it's not strengths-based to say, oh yeah, but life's good. It's strengths-based to acknowledge that, but also celebrate their strengths. So the next one of seeing yourself with a strengths-based perspective. So I speak from experience that it can be really hard to see ourselves with a strengths-based lens sometimes, but we need to allow ourselves the same compassion that we extend to our clients. And we should also be using the coping skills that we're teaching our clients and making sure that we have what we need to successfully engage in self-care. Due to the nature of our work, we should also be aware of any vicarious trauma that we may experience, and ultimately it's really important that you get the support that you need so that you can continue to support your clients. So going to coworkers, exercising, all of those things that we probably are happy when we hear our clients doing, those are things that we need to remind ourselves to do too. So
and using coworkers is a big one. At NBFS, we are always going to each other to talk about difficult clients or cases, and just sharing about the burden that can bring sometimes. It's a huge help, and then to also find ways of self-care outside of the workplace.
Yeah, I was nodding as Laura was saying that we definitely use each other pretty frequently.
I'm going to go ahead and read a case presentation, and then we've left time at the end to talk through this. We just wanted to talk about how to start with this approach in a practical way. And so this is sort of a common story that we hear here. So I'll go ahead and read it. Ayana is an Eritrean woman who is referred to the Program for Survivors of Torture and Severe Trauma. She has an extensive trauma history, including being arrested and tortured by police in her country of origin and being brought to the U.S. as a victim of labor trafficking. She does not speak any English, further isolating her. One day, Ayana's traffickers allowed her to come along on a family outing. She heard a woman speaking in her native language and started a conversation with her. She told the woman her story and the conditions that she was living in. The woman then helped Ayana escape her traffickers. Ayana now lives with this woman and her family. Ayana has children back in Eritrea and reports feeling hopeless and guilty for her children's circumstances. She does not have work authorization or permanent status, although she is pursuing asylum. She also reports that she has had a hard time focusing, remembering, learning new skills, and finding new places. She is dependent on others to accompany her to her appointments. Ayana becomes hyper-aroused when she talks about anything that reminds her of her torture. Ayana stated that she enjoys being around children and close friends. She talks of wanting to find a job so she can send money to her children. She has a strong faith and a belief that everything happens for a reason.
So again, using the chat function, how would you use a strengths-based approach with Ayana? So first of all, what are her strengths? But other things to consider, what are some potential goals that you might set? Identify existing coping skills and coping skills that she might benefit from learning. So again, focus first on what are her strengths. And as people are responding, there are some strengths that I think all of our clients have, and resilience is that big one. That's an invaluable quality to have, and I would say all of our refugees and asylum seekers and asylees have that.
Allison, I'm just going to read them out loud to you, okay?
That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, so the first one, strengths, love of children, friends, desire to work, faith. Next one, motivated to work. Next one, she likes to be around children, train her to work as a daycare worker. The next one, strengths are her family, her faith, her desire to work. Another one, good with children, strong faith. She has a positive outlook. Strengths, desire to work, love of children, friend, coping strategy, believing everything happens for a reason.
Yeah, you guys are good at this. The only one that I would add is that she's already a great self-advocate. And then to the next question, what are some potential goals that you would set for her? And also keep in mind she does not have work authorization at this time.
Okay, getting her into an English class. There's this question, just out of curiosity, was this case transferred to Dallas? This sounds exactly like one of our clients.
I changed quite a few of the details, like the country of origin, so my guess is it is a similar case.
Okay, some other responses are child care training, independent transportation, finding community jobs through DSHS, legal immigration assist her to get legal status, goals, ESL, applying for asylum and ensuring proper representation, counseling, ESL, and then the person who had asked that question says, okay, that's a different case. Another response, encourage her to talk to her children over the phone, English class, follow up with asylum process, make sure she understands her legal process.
Mm-hmm. The one thing that we did in addition to that would have been that we also got her into some job training. I know that's not a resource available everywhere though, and it was mostly like how to start a business, things like that. All right, so the next question was what are her existing coping skills? And you covered on some of those with the what were her strengths.
Self-advocating, one response. Strong faith, being around children, dependence on others from her community, faith.
Yeah, so like community support might be one. It's hard when support can cross into dependence and codependence. But yeah, I know you guys.
And some other responses are spending time with friends, still wants to care for her children overseas.
And then last of all, what are some coping skills that she might benefit from?
Learning a craft like knitting, calming herself down from memories, anchoring techniques, some hobby or activities to calm her down when she's reminded of torture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, and with clients like this, we always refer and do mental health counseling as well, which I know also isn't necessarily a resource for everyone, but the symptoms of having a hard time focusing, remembering, and learning new skills can often be related to the trauma piece, and so just giving her all the resources that are available to deal with that.
Another response was help with navigation bus training.
Yeah, definitely. That one took a while. And so with this case too, an additional, so with the coping skills, keep in mind that sometimes the memory anchor might not be the best one because that might bring up feelings of guilt, reminded of the torture, but this is a good one to use, like anchoring through the physical senses and then also finding a craft or an oasis like someone had already mentioned. All right, does anyone have any questions about the case?
Okay, one question. How is she doing now?
Good. Yeah, I won't go into too much detail. It's very unlikely anyone would be able to ever identify her, but just in case.
Okay, I don't see any other questions right now. Oh, one more question I see popped up. What do you do if you're working with volunteers that are impatient and lack this sort of training? How do you encourage them to use strengths-based approaches and not get frustrated in the day-to-day tasks?
I think our greatest resource, again, is that we available, and we really emphasize that if they're starting to feel frustration, not when it's becoming overwhelming, but when they first start, like, come talk with us. And we aren't just meeting one-on-one. A lot of times it will be like 3 people and a volunteer or something like that, where we're all talking about these are frustrations we're going through, and then you have that sense of camaraderie rather than feeling like you're alone with it. Obviously training, but I'm sure you're doing as much of that as you can, and I know it's hard to train a volunteer enough because they leave so quickly.
Yeah, but I think that in the training piece, having some sort of education around common things that people might be getting impatient about and why those characteristics we see so much in clients. So tie it to the past experience and what their what that might have done to their ability to engage in services in the way we would like them to. And again, just you can work with volunteers to take the pressure off of themselves. So, you know, engage with them enough so that they know the expectation is that they meet the client where they are, not necessarily to meet an unrealistic goal that the client isn't ready for.
Mm-hmm. And we limit the role of quite a few of our volunteers based on what they identify as their abilities and what their background is. And I know, again, that's not always doable in your organization, but I think shadowing and just having them see how you're approaching and then maybe talk about that afterwards as part of training of what did you notice on the questions I was asking or how I approached this problem. I think that can be really helpful. And do you have any other questions? Maybe, I don't think we skipped over any, but does anyone have any questions about strengths-based case management or how we would approach clients, anything like that?
Oh, there's one question. They're asking if we can send this in PowerPoint presentation. I definitely will be sending this out to you all. Another question, Are there any tools, gold plan, template, etc. you recommend or use?
I don't have any that I go to. Actually, there's a book I definitely recommend for people working with trauma survivors called The Body Remembers, and that's actually, sorry, on the last page, and so this will go out to everyone. There's a list of resources. Also healtorture.com, which probably won't be the most relevant for everyone, but that's a great resource. But mostly, like, The Body Remembers really guides a lot of what I do. I love that book. I recommend it.
One more question. Oh, thank you. Okay. I don't think there are any more questions. I think that was it. Okay. Thank you all for joining us on this webinar. Thank you, Laura and Allison, for presenting this information. I think a lot of people found this really helpful.
No problem.
And I will send out the presentation to everyone. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for your time.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you. Bye.
Bye.